Session that we recorded just a couple of days ago with the Bitcoin Jesus, Roger Ver. Roger Ver is a former politician and Kittian Navisian early investor in Bitcoin-related startups. He was formerly an American citizen. He now resides in Japan. He has been a prominent supporter of Bitcoin adoption and sees Bitcoins as a means to promote economic freedom. He identifies as a libertarian, an anarcho-capitalist, peace advocate, and advocates for individualism and voluntarism. Roger Ver, welcome to the Vin Armani Show.
Thank you. Although I think the people that put in my Wikipedia page that I'm a former politician are ones that don't like me. So I'm anything but a politician. So.
Fair enough, but I think that gets to the point of what I would like to do today, which is tell a little bit about you and to tell your story a little bit. I think people who have seen recent interviews of you or who have just gotten involved in the cryptocurrency world know you as an advocate of one side in what a lot of people are calling like the Bitcoin civil war, and there have been some contentious debates. I think in order to even understand where you're coming from and your vision, it's important to understand your story. And it is a very unique story, I think, in terms of the people who we actually know who they are in the world of Bitcoin. I think it could be argued that you are the most important thought leader and certainly the most well-known. You're often called the Bitcoin Jesus. So maybe if we could do a little gospel of Roger, as it were. Can you tell us a little bit about your vision overall, just 3,000-foot view of what Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is as you discovered it, and also what you believe that it is on the high-level view?
Yeah, so I think the road or the path that I took to get there is important. And if I had to pick a point in which it started, I would say it was probably junior high school, maybe between 7th and 8th grade, or maybe 8th grade before freshman year, and it was summertime. And my parents said, you're not allowed to play video games anymore that day or something to that effect. So I was looking for something to do, and I was looking on the bookshelf and thought maybe I'll read a book. And I came across a book on the bookshelf there called Socialism by Ludwig von Mises. And maybe a number of your readers already have heard of that book. But at the time, I had no idea who von Mises is or what this book Socialism was about. And I didn't really even fully know what socialism was or what capitalism was or any of those things, but I kind of had this vague understanding that Americans are supposed to be in favor of capitalism and against socialism. But since I didn't even really know what socialism was, I figured I should hear the other side of the argument. And so when I picked up this book that I think it was the Wall Street Journal termed as the Ludwig von Mises's devastating critique of socialism, but when I picked it up, I thought it was a pro-socialist book, to be honest. And I read the book, and the main point of the book is that without prices, you don't know what raw resources should be used to produce what consumer goods, and the prices transmit information. And without these prices and without the price mechanism, it's actually impossible for any sort of command economy to figure out what things should be built out of what other things. So it cannot work. Even in theory, socialism can't work. And then so I found the whole book really, really interesting. And that was kind of this path that set me down reading every economics book I could get my hands on. So throughout, from that time on and all through high school and after high school, I read, every single book by Ludwig von Mises. I read every single book by Murray Rothbard. I read every single book by Milton Friedman. I read every single economics book that I could get my hands on, including I read stuff by Karl Marx. I read, John Maynard Keynes' original text. I read all of Adam Smith's books. And the more I read these economics books, the more I realized that kind of everything in life revolves around economic decisions. And it really, really shaped my view of the world. The more economics I studied, the more I realized that governments are just getting in the way of the entire world's rate of economic growth, and the entire world would be a better place and a richer place, and people would have a higher standard of living if the government just got out of the way. And so I didn't start out a libertarian at all. I didn't start out an anarchist at all. It was the more economics I studied, the more I got dragged in that way. And then much, much, much later on, I started studying some of the underlying moral philosophy as well. And, some of the ideas of, John Locke and, much more contemporary people like Larkin Rose. Everybody owns themselves. You own your own body. Your own labor that you create with your body belongs to you, and what you mix your labor with that wasn't, previously owned in the state of nature becomes your property because you've mixed something that was your property with something that was previously unowned. And I became really, really persuaded by the moral arguments. And it was really, really interesting to me how what's moral and what's practical just line up and fit together just absolutely perfectly in almost every instance. And so what an interesting world where what's moral and what's practical are so intertwined. So I think the moral arguments for freedom are a little bit easier to understand at this point, but it was initially the economic arguments for freedom that brought me there. So then I wanted to tell the world about this. I wanted to tell the world, hey, more economic freedom makes everybody better off. We don't need government to control the economy, and if they do, it's going to make everybody worse off. So I ran for California State Assembly as a libertarian.
There's the politician part, right? There's
the politician part. So on my platform as a politician, I said if I were elected, I would accept no salary whatsoever because that money would potentially come from people that maybe don't want to pay my salary. And I said I would repeal as many laws and as many taxes as I possibly could. So that was my political politician platform. No salary because it comes from taxes, which are stolen from people against their will. And I'd repeal as many laws as I could. So, and this was back in the year 2000, which was not too long after an event that happened in Waco, Texas, where another successful government program, they locked a bunch of kids together in a church and burnt down the church in Waco, Texas, along with some of their parents that, maybe they were a bit, religiously nutty. But even if the kids have, parents who are religious nuts, locking them in a church and burning them to death doesn't help them one bit. And so I referred to the ATF and FBI agents who murdered all these kids. And I think it was, I'd have to Google the exact number at this point, but I think it was like something like 60 kids that were under 12 years old.
That sounds right.
And it was like 100 and something people total. So like they murdered, if you're under 12 years old, think back when you were 12 years old, you follow your parents' guidance, you live with your parents, you don't have any say in it whatsoever. They burnt these kids to death. They murdered these kids. So here we are, the ATF and FBI that try to pretend that they're here to protect us and protect the children. What did they do? They burnt them to death. So any ATF and FBI agents, all the people that participated in that, you are a bunch of jackbooted thugs and murderers, and you should be ashamed for what you did there and what you're doing everywhere else as well. So I'm just here advocating voluntary interaction. You guys are the criminals there. So I said those sorts of things at a debate with the Republican and Democratic candidate at San Jose State University. It just so happened that there were some ATF agents in the audience.
Oh, boy.
And, yep, guess what? I was, I think, 20, maybe 21 years old at that point. So I'd already had some success in business, had a pretty nice car for a 20-year-old, had maybe, 6 employees or something at that point, and my business was really starting to grow. Mainly, we were selling computer components. One other thing that I was selling on the side was called a Pest Control Report 2000, which is basically a firecracker used by farmers to scare birds out of their cornfield. I was selling these on eBay. This was back when eBay had a guns and ammo section, and you could sell shotguns and rifles and handguns and ammunition and everything else right there on eBay. So it wasn't anything out of the abnormal. I was accepting credit card payments. I was accepting PayPal once PayPal came out. Like I wasn't trying to hide what I was doing in any way whatsoever because I didn't think it was illegal. If I thought it was illegal, I wouldn't have done it. Anyhow, I wound up being the only person in the entire nation to be prosecuted for selling those without a permit, even though the company that I was buying them from out of South Carolina had no permit. The manufacturer in Missouri who manufactured millions of these and sold them all over the country had no permit, and dozens of other resellers on eBay and websites and Cabela's sporting goods catalog, right? If you're from the U.S., you've probably heard of Cabela's.
Sure.
They were selling them right there in their catalog as well. I wound up being the only person in the entire nation to be prosecuted for selling those. And even while I was being prosecuted, even after I signed the plea deal, other companies were still selling this exact same product with no permit. None of them wound up being prosecuted at all. What eventually happened was the manufacturer was basically told to stop selling them. None of them went to jail. None of them had any problem whatsoever. So I signed a plea deal, did 10 months in federal prison, had 3 years of federal probation. The day I was allowed to leave the country, I left. And from the time I was prosecuted until the time I left the country, I absolutely kept my mouth shut about politics. I didn't talk about economics. I didn't talk about voluntarism. I didn't talk about any of this at all. And it wasn't until Bitcoin came along and I heard about Bitcoin and I realized that this is the tool to undermine every single government on the entire planet's ability to control people. And what a wonderful thing for economic freedom and what a wonderful thing for personal freedom And so I couldn't keep my mouth shut anymore. I was way too excited about it, and I had to do absolutely everything I could to tell people about Bitcoin and get as many people using Bitcoin as fast as we possibly could, because it undermines every single government on the planet's ability to control the economy. And that's retarding the entire world's rate of economic growth. So the first people, of course, I targeted with this message were the libertarians. So I started paying for advertisements on Free Talk Live, which is a libertarian radio show on more than 150 radio stations in the United States. I sent a whole bunch of Bitcoins to all of their users. I told them, post your Bitcoin address on Free Talk Live's Facebook group, and I'll send you an entire Bitcoin. And, hundreds or thousands of people did. Bitcoins were only about, $2 at the time I did that. And I'd already had, quite a bit of success from my previous business. So a lot of people claim that I'm some, schmuck who got lucky from Bitcoin. And maybe, but I had already gotten lucky lots of other times in businesses before too. So I had owned, multiple supercars before Bitcoin had ever been invented. I was basically retired, hanging out in Japan, doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu and chasing girls when I heard about
Nice.
Bitcoin. So life was pretty good before Bitcoin came along. But, chasing girls and doing jiu-jitsu, that's fun and all. But how often does an opportunity as exciting as Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies come along where you have the ability to make the entire world a freer, better, happier place for every single human being on the planet? That's way more exciting than jiu-jitsu or chasing girls. So I had to jump in full time. So I took the assets that I had earned from my previous business, and I basically funded the entire first generation of Bitcoin businesses years before anybody else from Silicon Valley was investing in the space or really even paying any attention. I set up the first website to allow people to buy, hundreds of thousands of consumer electronics items for Bitcoin. It's just been all Bitcoin nonstop, all day, every day. So I made my first investment in blockchain.info when the founder of it was still living at home with his parents, and he was running the entire website on a Mac Mini out of his bedroom.
That's awesome.
So that's how far everything's come. And today, they have tens of millions of users, and it's the biggest Bitcoin wallet in the world. So it's really exciting that I've been able to be such a key part of watching this entire ecosystem and helping this entire ecosystem develop.
Well, one thing that I want to talk about, because it's one thing that I think is very important to the current discussion and framing the current discussion. You're one of the first people who set out, and I think it's clear from what you've laid out, that how you set out to bring people into the use of Bitcoin, the adoption of Bitcoin, was as a merchant, as making goods available for sale with cryptocurrency. There are clearly you're giving them away so at that time the speculative value of these things was negligible. People weren't getting involved so that they could speculate, hoping that that the price would go up. Can you talk to us about the process, about your thinking process in terms of opening up your own business to this new currency, knowing that clearly there were some risks? I mean, you're philosophically aligned, but talk about as a business owner and as a merchant making that decision to open up your business and to try to use this at a time when the tools weren't even there yet.
So I think it actually stems back to my study of economics. So in economics, there's the theory of the origin of money, and the main one that I think is as close to accurate as can be is Mises's regression theorem, which is basically some consumer good winds up becoming money because people are using it that way, and it has to have certain properties that make it useful as money. So durable, easily divisible, easily recognizable, limited supply. There's a number of characteristics there. And so I read all these theories in books about how something becomes to be used as money, and I was pretty convinced by the theories in the books, and I thought that they were true. But then when I went to prison, I got to see the prison economy, and I got to see that sure enough, the theories in the books are true, and consumer goods like tobacco or top ramen soups or cans of fish wind up becoming money. And I got to see the entire prison economy where one guy would fix other people's radios, other people would polish people's boots, other people would do other people's laundries, and everybody would pay everybody in these prison money, which was mainly, three different ones. It was actually postage stamps, tobacco, top ramen soups, and then cans of fish. So 4 different things. But I got to see firsthand in action right before my eyes in a limited economy where you can kind of keep an eye on everything that's going on, that the theories in the books that I had read were true in reality as well. And then when Bitcoin came along, I knew people were going to start using it as money because it was useful as money. So I knew that was going to happen. So my business strategy was to buy up as many Bitcoins as I could early on, and then build all the tools to make them even easier for people to actually start using as money. And in doing that, I get to set the entire world free at the same time as well. So I have like my philosophical motivations and my business motivations are aligned. So, what more motivation could you possibly need than having your philosophical and business interests be aligned so clearly? So I set out to make Bitcoin as useful as I possibly could in commerce. And I know the goal of this show isn't really to talk about the scaling debate, but
we'll get there. Don't worry, we're going to get there.
Okay. So I think a lot of the people they view Bitcoin only as a store of value don't realize that you won't use something as a store of value if it's not also useful in commerce. And if you destroy the usefulness in commerce, it's not useful as a store of value anymore either. And that's what I'm so upset about happening with Bitcoin right now. The usefulness of Bitcoin in commerce is being destroyed. And if that's successfully destroyed, Bitcoin's usefulness as a store of value will be destroyed as well.
So let's walk slowly through it if we could, because like I say, I think that we can talk about the scaling debate in a way that a 6-year-old can understand. I think we can do it if we're careful about it, and I think that even people who don't understand crypto, this might actually be the discussion that makes them open their eyes about the possibilities of this thing. Let's maybe start this way. What are the businesses that you could describe? What are the sort of portfolio? We've been showing some of the logos. What are the portfolio of businesses that you decided early on to invest in? And if you could, just for each of them briefly, tell us why you felt that they were important to this overall ecosystem that you're describing here.
Sure. So probably the most widely known one at this point is blockchain.info, which is the world's #1 Bitcoin wallet. It's responsible for more Bitcoin transactions than every single other Bitcoin wallet combined. And the reason I invested in that one is because it puts users in control of their own private keys. The wallet service provider, blockchain, doesn't hold anybody's money. It doesn't have the ability to freeze anybody's account. It doesn't have the ability to control anybody's funds in any way whatsoever. And granted, I made that investment 5.5 years ago, coming up on 6 years ago now. There's wallets that put users in even more control today than maybe that one. But at the time, it was definitely by far the easiest wallet for people to use with the most user, self-control over the wallet. So that was a no-brainer. I had the opportunity to invest in Coinbase at that time as well. Brian Armstrong, the founder, basically, said, Roger, please, please, please. And maybe I should have, but I had already invested in blockchain.info, and I really like blockchain.info's design better because blockchain.info allows the users to hold their own funds themselves. In fact, that's the only option with blockchain.info. You hold your money yourself. Whereas with Coinbase, they hold the Bitcoins for you. They operate just like a Bitcoin bank. So if at any point the IRS or the FBI or ATF go to Coinbase and say, give us Roger's Bitcoins, they'll have to comply or they'll get shut down. Whereas
and we might see that happen. We might see that
happen. And there's
a
really good chance we'll see that happen. Maybe it's already happened with specific accounts and they just weren't allowed to make it public and we don't know about it. In fact, I would be surprised if it hasn't already happened, to be honest. Whereas with blockchain.info, if those same agencies go to blockchain.info and say, give us Roger's Bitcoins, they'll say, sorry, we don't have the ability to do that. And all the wallet code, all the software, our client-side code is completely open source. So everybody that wants to and feels inclined to can verify the code to make sure that there aren't any backdoors in that as well. So that's a real difference in design philosophy. So one of the other ones that I invested in also was BitPay, which I believe is probably the biggest merchant processor in the entire world for Bitcoin transactions, which if you have a business and you want to start accepting Bitcoin, you probably need some help. You need some easy software to plug into your website. And most businesses that started accepting Bitcoin, they weren't philosophically on board with the grand vision. They didn't want to hold Bitcoin for the long term. They just wanted to be able to accept more payments from more people around the world without having to worry about chargebacks or credit card fraud or any of that sort of stuff. And Bitcoin with BitPay enables that. They've made, I think somewhere in the ballpark of 100,000 merchants are using using BitPay to accept Bitcoin. And so there's just, Kraken, of course, Kraken is one of the top Bitcoin exchanges in the entire world. I've been friends with the CEO of Kraken since we were teenagers. Kraken allows you to buy Bitcoin incredibly easy with your government-issued fiat currency. So if you're tired of dollars or euros or yen, you can send them over to Kraken and get your Bitcoins or a bunch of other cryptocurrencies at this point and start using that. So basically, I just tried to invest in all the different pieces of the ecosystem that that make Bitcoin useful for people. And the one that people that come to Bitcoin more recently probably have never even heard of, but probably the one I'm the most proud of, was bitcoinstore.com, that allowed people to buy more than 500,000 consumer electronics products for Bitcoin at prices that were as cheap or even cheaper than Amazon. And this was before there was any Newegg or Overstock or Tiger Direct or any of these other businesses that were accepting Bitcoin. There was basically, people selling homemade, knitted socks and from alpaca wool and things like that. And this suddenly opened up an entire door of things. And we did over $4 million in sales our first year in Bitcoin, at a time when Bitcoins were like, in the single digits, and then in the teens. That was a pretty darn amazing amount of business that we were able to do, which kind of showed the world that it can be used in commerce, that, yeah, people can use it in business. And I did my best to point this out to companies like Newegg and Tiger Direct and Amazon on Twitter. I would post, screenshots of how quickly our sales were coming in. And I was telling them, hey, look at all these new customers that I'm getting because I accept Bitcoin. You guys should too. So I don't think bitcoinstore.com, I think it played a really major role in tipping all of these other merchants to start accepting Bitcoin around the world. And here we are today. And I guess a bigger question at this point is, what can't you buy with Bitcoin? Whereas in the early days was, what can you buy with Bitcoin? And Bitcoin Store was the answer to that. We said you can buy any consumer electronics product you want at prices cheaper than Amazon.
So that leads me to my next point, because I think that this really does get to the key. If people start to understand this, I think that they can really better understand your position in this whole scaling debate. Can you expand a little bit on, having been a merchant time and time again, having created tools for merchants, having been an advocate and an evangelist to other major merchants, can you talk to us about what it is that merchants want from a cryptocurrency? You said some of them are not philosophically aligned. I think that's totally reasonable and totally fine. I don't think there's any of them that are philosophically aligned with Visa, but they take it. You know what I mean? Can you talk to us about what is it, because I think it's so missing from the understanding of the people on the other side of the debate. What is it that merchants are wanting? What is it that they want to see from a cryptocurrency, or what do they want it to provide in order for them to jump on board with both feet?
And one step before that also, I think it's worth pointing out that Bitcoin never would have become viewed as this store of value if people hadn't been using it in commerce first. If merchants weren't accepting it as payment, nobody would have even started having this notion at all that it could be used as a store of value. And so to answer your question about what do merchants want, they want payments that are irreversible and that are as close to instant as possible. They want the fees to be low, and they want the risk of chargebacks to be low as well. And they want the price to be as steady as possible. They don't like big price fluctuations. And Bitcoin's lost, a lot of those things. So in the early days, the rule on the Bitcoin network was first seen, first safe, which meant that once you broadcasted a Bitcoin transaction to the network, if that was the first one the network saw, that's the first one the miners were going to include in a block. And it became really, really, really difficult to double spend someone's transaction. Whereas a lot of these people on the other side of the scaling debate have been advocating for this thing called replaced by fee, which means I can pay you, and then before that transaction has been confirmed in a block, if I pay a bigger fee, I can send the Bitcoins to somebody else.
Oh, wow.
Which means you're going to wait for who knows how long for it to get included in a block before you know that your payment's actually safe. That's kryptonite to merchant adoption. No merchant was going to want to accept those sorts of payments. Another thing are the fees. So last night, I was at a Bitcoin meetup, and some guy who was new to Bitcoin really wanted to buy some Bitcoin, so I agreed to sell him some. And the fee for me to send some Bitcoin from my phone to his was $8.50.
That sounds, yep, that's what it is right now.
$8.50 for one single Bitcoin transaction from my phone to his. And I asked him, I said, would you prefer Bitcoin Cash or something else? He's like, no, I need Bitcoin. And so he was brand new to Bitcoin. I suspect he'd only heard about Bitcoin a week or two earlier, and he saw the price going up like crazy. And so he didn't care about the fees at the moment. But for any merchant or anybody, that restaurant accepts Bitcoin. That was the first restaurant in all of Japan to start accepting Bitcoin. I'd wonder if anybody paid in Bitcoin at all tonight, because if you have to pay an extra $8.50 on top of your, couple dollars for a drink or a couple dollars for a food, or you can pay with a credit card and the fees are hidden from you at all, and the fees that the merchant pays is maybe 2.5% or 3% there. That's way less than the $8 on a $10 or $20 meal. people are going to stop using Bitcoin for commerce where $8 matters. And there's 1,001 other competitors to Bitcoin that would just love to take Bitcoin's market share on there. So merchants need fast, easy, secure, hard to double spend transactions, and all of those characteristics that make Bitcoin useful in commerce are being undermined right now, right before our eyes, and that's why we're seeing all the altcoins just skyrocket in value. And even Bitcoin.com now, it's September 1st here in Japan. Later today, we'll be doing our payroll and paying all the stuff for the end of the month. I think more than half of our employees have opted to be paid in Bitcoin Cash. And it looks like my video stopped. But,
we lost you. We've still got your audio. Audio. Let me see if I can work this thing around.
I think I can probably fix it for you.
Yeah? Okay. There we go. We got you back. Yeah. Fantastic. The technical workaround. So okay. I think that, would you say then that basically what you've presented is the fundamental core basis of your argument of what it is that you're arguing for in the scaling debate, is that it's fundamentally you want to be able to turn Bitcoin into a currency that meets all of those sort of qualifications as something that both merchants and consumers will want to use on a daily basis, and that's not happening. It's
dying right before our eyes.
So explain this then, because it's often we will present our own argument, but I do like to sort of present the strongest argument on the other side and then rip it apart. I don't necessarily think the other side's argument is all that strong, but as you understand it and as you've heard it so many times, I think people who are not involved in this debate hear what you have to say right now and they say, okay, yeah, that makes total sense. Why on earth would anybody disagree with what Roger just said? What is the argument for not doing the things that you just said?
So the argument on the other side is that if we allow Bitcoin to become so popular, it'll take a more expensive computer to run a full node. And right now there's somewhere in the ballpark of 100,000 full nodes around the world, and somewhere around the ballpark of like maybe 8,000 of those accept incoming connections as well, which is, if you're real deep into this, that's an important distinction. But for most people, it doesn't matter. Anyhow, their argument is that if it becomes too expensive to run one of these full nodes, that less people will run these full nodes, and then it'll be easy for government to come in and shut down all the full nodes. And if they shut down all the full nodes, that's the end of Bitcoin. And that's their argument, I think. But I don't have that fear at all. I think the best way to make Bitcoin resilient to government attacks is to get as many people around the world using it as possible. And even right now, you can literally run a Bitcoin full node on a $20 Raspberry Pi. Mm-hmm. If it winds up costing $20,000 for a server in some data center somewhere, but the entire world is using Bitcoin, guess what? There's going to be even more of these $20,000 computers around the world running Bitcoin full nodes. And all you need to do is find any one of them that's willing to relay your transaction to the network and include it in the block. So I'm not worried by their argument whatsoever. And some of them seem to have this weird distinction, thinking that every user should be running a full node themselves. And I don't share that view whatsoever. That seems like nonsense to me. Like you don't need to run a web server yourself to view websites or to even host a website. You don't need to run a SMTP server yourself to use email.
That's right.
You don't need to run a full node yourself in order to use Bitcoin.
Well, my question to you, and so I've been a software developer for 20 years, and I started developing with Bitcoin in about 2013, and I've done some point of sale stuff and whatnot. And I mean, I would love to see it be Bitcoin because I already have all of those libraries built myself. I've already developed the prototypes for Bitcoin. A lot of the other blockchains and protocols there's not as many libraries that are publicly available that work as well. So I would love it to be that. But one question that I ask all the time, and I'd love to ask you, is why is it important that it's Bitcoin?
It's not at all. And I only hear the other side. The other side of the scaling debate are the ones that always seem to say, why would anybody ever use Bitcoin? We don't have to worry about competition at all. Bitcoin is guaranteed to be the winner in the end. And from a philosophical point of view, it doesn't matter if it's Bitcoin. It can be Monero, it can be Zcash, it can be whatever. And I think the ones that provide the strongest competition to Bitcoin are the ones with the bigger privacy. And that's another point that's worth noting, is that these, the small blocks in the scaling argument, that's really, really undermined the fungibility of Bitcoin. Fungibility is just means that every piece of Bitcoin is the same as every other piece. These 1 megabyte blocks make it really, really easy to track what people are doing. The high fees make it so nobody's willing to use a mixer to add privacy. So it's undermining one of the characteristics that make Bitcoin money as well. So, but to answer your question, it doesn't have to be Bitcoin in the end. It doesn't matter if it's Bitcoin in the end. It doesn't make any difference whatsoever, other than it's like a big setback because, like you said, there's all these libraries and infrastructure have already been built around Bitcoin. So it's super easy for new people to, new software developers to get involved in Bitcoin because everything's already there. The tools are there ready to go. Now we have to build them all again on Monero or Zcash or Ethereum or take your pick. It's possible, but now we're losing, a couple years, head start that Bitcoin had. And Bitcoin previously had this light year head start over every other cryptocurrency. And it did seem impossible that anything else could catch up ever. But thanks to the high fees and full blocks and the horrible user experience that they provide, all these other cryptocurrencies are catching up really, really, really fast. And now, Bitcoin has, I haven't checked for a couple of days, but I think it's, south of 50% of the global market cap of cryptocurrencies. And it was at 90+% before the blocks became full, not very long ago at all. And I think that that's a direct result of people having a bad user experience with Bitcoin. Guess what? They're going to start using something else. And we're seeing that happen with Bitcoin.com. I think more than half of our bills that get paid here today for the end of the month are going to wind up being paid in Bitcoin Cash and not Bitcoin.
Okay, so let's start talking about that. First, if we could just briefly get out of the way what your proposed solution to faster confirmations, faster transactions. I'm trying to keep this as high level as we possibly can, right, without getting into the weeds. High level, fast transactions and low fees. It's not happening. It's not happening on Bitcoin. What's the solution? What needs to change?
The solution is already happening right before our eyes. People are going to switch to the currencies that give them fast transactions and low fees and with more privacy than Bitcoin provides. So that's why we've seen a lot of the privacy coins just skyrocket in value. And we've seen the amount of commerce being done on them skyrocket as well. So people are migrating from Bitcoin to these other coins. And the main thing that Bitcoin still has going for it is its huge network effect. It has all these libraries, all these users, all this name recognition. You can go to somebody on the street now and say, have you heard of Bitcoin? And probably 5 times out of 7, the person's going to say, yeah, sure, I've heard of Bitcoin. If you ask them, have you heard of Ethereum or have you heard of Dash or Monero? They'll say, no, what's that? So Bitcoin had this huge head start, but it's being undermined and people are switching to using things other than Bitcoin. So what's the answer? The answer is the same as always in any thing, not just cryptocurrencies, but when it comes to, coffee or Coca-Cola or apartments or cars, people are going to buy and use whatever gives them the best bang for their buck. And if, using Bitcoin costs $9 a transaction and using, Dash or Zcash or Ethereum or whatever else costs a couple of pennies and provides about the same level of user experience, people are going to start using those other ones. And that's what's happening. So the answer, if we want to rescue Bitcoin and for Bitcoin holders that would love to see Bitcoin be the winner in the end, we need to make Bitcoin give it the very best user experience we possibly can, which means fast transactions and low fees and the greatest amount of privacy we can. And the current Blockstream and core developers openly advocate for the exact opposite. They openly say that they want high fees. They don't make it a secret at all. When people hear that, they think, I must be lying about that. Who in their right mind would want high fees? But no, go out there and I put together a YouTube video about it with a bunch of their own quotes. They openly say they want the fees to be high. Many of them say they want the fees for one single Bitcoin transaction to be $100 or even $1,000. Well, I have news for you. If Bitcoin transactions cost $1,000, nobody's going to use it. The fees will never get that high. People will migrate to things other than Bitcoin long before the fees get to be $1,000 per transaction. So these people want the exact opposite thing of what makes Bitcoin useful in commerce. And it's the fact that Bitcoin is useful in commerce that enables Bitcoin to even be considered as a store of value or digital gold or whatever this perceptions that these people have. If Bitcoin isn't useful in commerce, it's not useful for any of this other store of value stuff either. It has to be both or it will be neither.
So let's talk about, we spoke a little bit about the altcoins, as it were, but there's also this other phenomenon of the forks. And as we saw with Bitcoin Cash, that's coming along. Is there a solution within the realm of forking? could this situation, first, let's talk about, is Bitcoin Cash, is that particular fork, does it have the potential to solve any of the issues that we're talking about? And then second, is that model of forking and potentially getting a spin-off that has some of these other aspects to it, do you think that that's a viable or even possible or plausible solution to the problem?
It pretty clearly works. Bitcoin Cash is what, four weeks old now, and it's the third biggest cryptocurrency in the entire world. So that was, I don't think anybody can argue that that wasn't an amazing, incredible success. And we've seen almost all the exchanges have already integrated Bitcoin Cash. Most of the wallets have already announced that they're integrating Bitcoin Cash. Some of them have already finished that integration. Over on Bitcoin.com, our wallet has Bitcoin Cash available in the beta version right now. We'll be releasing the version to the public here for everybody as soon as Apple approves it in the Apple Store. But anyhow, the adoption takes time, but how far it's come in 4 weeks is pretty amazing. But I think my real prediction, if Bitcoin Cash usurps, Bitcoin 1x, or I'm sorry, SegWit 1x or SegWit 2x versions of Bitcoin, I think the real winners are going to be altcoins in that scenario, because people, and at the end of the day, I guess that's smart too. Like you can't get emotionally attached to a currency. You need to use whichever currency is the one that works the best for you and whatever goals you're trying to accomplish. And if that's not Bitcoin, you should use something other than Bitcoin, is the fact of the matter. I would love it to be Bitcoin. I poured 7 years of my heart and soul into it at this point, but it's not guaranteed to be Bitcoin in the end. A couple of years ago, I thought it was almost certain that it would be Bitcoin, but wow, these economic ignoramuses from Blockstream and Core have really undermined Bitcoin's usefulness as money. And I'm sure some of them are smart programmers and smart cryptographers, but if you don't understand what makes something money, and you undermine the characteristics of Bitcoin that make Bitcoin money, people are going to stop using it as money. And that's what we're seeing happen right before our eyes. And people are starting to use the monetary competitors to Bitcoin. And that's why, Dash and Monero and Zcash and Ethereum, of course, and, a whole bunch of others are just exploding in popularity and value, is because they're providing a better user experience than Bitcoin for people at this point.
I'll tell you anecdotally, I recently released a book and decided to only sell it for cryptocurrency, not to put it up on Amazon as I've done my others. And I will tell you that a minority of the transactions that are coming in to buy this book and to buy the audiobook are Bitcoin. As a matter of fact, today I was shocked. I had my first Zcash one come in, and I was like, wow, people are actually using Zcash to buy goods. So I'm taking about 10 of them, you know what I mean? So I'm actually getting a chance to see. It's shocking me how much, even over the last 2 months, that the amount of Bitcoin that's come in has gone down. To your point, I want to shift gears a little bit. You being there in Japan and us talking about people actually using cryptocurrency. Japan sort of making... Did they make all cryptocurrency legal tender, or was it just specific ones? Was it just Bitcoin?
So it's not just Bitcoin, but
okay,
you have to get permission from the government for that specific cryptocurrency.
Okay, so let's talk about
there's a government list
yeah.
of approved currencies here.
Okay, so let's talk about this potential roadmap for the adoption of Bitcoin. I'm interested or the adoption of cryptocurrency in general as a currency. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Both as someone who lives in Japan and as an anarchist as well. Do you think that, and this is for the statist libertarians who are watching, do you think that moving in the legal realm to try to make Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies legal tender is something that we as libertarians should even be pursuing? Is that even a path that makes any sense to go the Japan route? Or is that actually shooting ourselves in the foot when it comes to the real power of cryptocurrency?
So there's I guess two answers to that question.
Okay.
So philosophically, you shouldn't need permission from a bunch of strangers to use whatever cryptocurrency you want. Like of course not. Why should I need their permission any more than they should need permission from me? So if I started sending letters to people in the mail saying they need my permission to use a particular cryptocurrency because some other people and I got together and wrote down words on a piece of paper and called it a law, in our little group, they'd think I'm a nutcase. And if I started threatening them that if they don't obey my telling them that they have to get permission from me, and I'll lock them in a cage if they don't, they would think I'm a psychopath and a violent individual that should be locked away from the rest of society. But when those people calling themselves government do the exact same thing, send threatening letters to people in the mail and say, if you don't obey us and get permission from us, we're going to hurt you. People just say, oh, it's government. Of course we have to obey them. So philosophically, of course, that's all a bunch of nonsense. And nobody should have to get permission from anybody else to do anything that's peaceful. One fantastic libertarian book, if I can recommend, that
Please.
I read when I was a teenager that I don't think gets enough attention is a book by, I think it was Leonard Reed, and it's called Anything That's Peaceful. And I think he wrote it in the 50s. And basically he just lays out a case, in the 50s is pretty early. He laid out a case for just, let anybody do anything that's peaceful, and think how much simpler and better our world would be if anybody was allowed to do anything that's peaceful. And so anyhow, I really thought that was a great book. And I think most libertarians maybe haven't heard of that book. It was written, I'm pretty sure it was written by Leonard Reed, the same guy that wrote the essay I Pencil for anybody.
Oh, yes, that's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, so and it's been like 25 years since I read it, so I'm almost positive that's who the author is. But anyhow, great. It was a great book. Anything That's Peaceful was the name of it. But so, should we lobby governments and ask them for permission to use cryptocurrencies? In the real world that we live in, the fact of the matter is those crazy violent people calling themselves the state will use violence against us if we don't get their permission. And so philosophically, no, we shouldn't need their permission at all whatsoever. But in the real world, if you want to have a business and customers and serve people and be able to operate for more than a couple of days until they figure out that you're operating without their permission, you have to jump through their hoops. You have to get the business's licenses. You have to pay the taxes. You have to do all of those things, or these crazy psychopaths will hurt you for not having gotten their permission. So, I run a pretty big business, but I have to jump through all those hoops as well myself. Not because I agree with them, but because these people will hurt me if I don't. So they don't have my moral acceptance whatsoever, but from a practical standpoint, I have to do what the violent people say. But I want to point out that, hey, those are violent people that are threatening peaceful people with violence. And if you think threatening peaceful people with violence isn't okay, don't think that those people are okay. And I imagine a lot of your viewers have already seen it, but if this sounds like a little bit of an alien idea to you, go and watch a video on YouTube. It's only 4 minutes long. It's called George Ought to Help.
Yes.
And it's a fantastic video. And in 4 minutes, you can see so incredibly clearly how everything that government does is backed up by the threat of violence, even if you don't see it or realize it right off the bat it is. So it's called George Ought to Help. It's 4 minutes on YouTube. Fantastic video.
So I want to ask you, now that we've kind of gone through your history, with where we are at today, with Bitcoin specifically, but cryptocurrency in general, if you look back at your first sort of realization that this is going to be something that you're going to dedicate a significant amount of time and energy and resources to, back to that beginning, has the trajectory for you been what you imagined at the time? Has it been less? Where are we in terms of, has it exceeded your expectations? I'm very interested to know that.
We were right on track. And never, ever, ever in my wildest dreams did I think that Bitcoin would be choked and stifled by a bunch of people who claim to be Bitcoin fans. And by my biggest fear is that governments would see the writing on the wall that this is going to undermine their ability to control money, and they would make Bitcoin illegal, back right from day one, once they realized what was going on. And that would make it, really, really difficult for it to gain worldwide adoption. So my goal was to get as many people using Bitcoin as quickly as I possibly could. And I really, really, I think, did an amazing job of that, and really succeeded beyond, what it seems like, would be possible out of anything other than like a science fiction novel. And then once Bitcoin really started to get mainstream adoption and traction, and a bunch of people came along and said, no, we need to limit the number of people that can use Bitcoin on chain, and we're going to limit the blocks to 1 megabyte. And if you don't like it, piss off, is basically what they said. And wow, like, what a twist in the science fiction novel that is Bitcoin, that it was going on this amazing path, and then a bunch of people that weren't part of the government that claimed they liked Bitcoin diverted Bitcoin and undermined Bitcoin's usefulness as money, causing it to probably not be the cryptocurrency that wins in the end. If I had to guess at this point, I would guess that it's probably less likely than not that Bitcoin is going to be the cryptocurrency that wins in the end. And it breaks my heart to say that, because it had, just light years head start over everything else. And then these people like, I'll name names: Adam Back, Greg Maxwell, Peter Todd, Eric Lombroso, Luke Jr. I'm sure they're smart programmers. They have no clue why Bitcoin is useful as money, and they've intentionally undermined Bitcoin's usefulness as money. And they've opened the door wide open for people to start wanting to use things other than Bitcoin in commerce. And if people start using things other than Bitcoin in commerce, that's the end of Bitcoin being used as the store of value as well, or the one chain to rule them all. And we're seeing that happen right before our eyes. So I appreciate where your guys' heart is at for the most part to those guys, but man, you guys have destroyed Bitcoin. Sorry, that's the truth.
It's a bit of a tragic tale, but I think that what you have been predicting has come to fruition. And certainly you've been predicting this and investing your heart into Bitcoin and into cryptocurrency. The story's obviously not quite done yet, and the work that you've put in it's really not done, because I think cryptocurrency is where it's going to be, right? And so I hope that regardless of what happens with Bitcoin, that you will stick around, because I know that your guidance is going to be needed in this community for a very, very long time to come. No one has the wisdom that you have just from having actually done it. If you have anything to say to people just getting involved right now, particularly I like to call them Bitcoin bros, because I'm seeing a lot of people in my Facebook feed who are my old time friends and stuff, who it's just like every single bad decision that they could make economically, these guys in their personal life, these guys are taking out bank loans and buying Bitcoin at weird price points and the whole nine. If you could say anything to people entering into the world of cryptocurrency right now, from either side, just from your experience, your own wisdom of something that they could take with them to help them along in this journey, what would you say to them?
So I guess kind of the same advice applies to investing everywhere. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. And when choosing which crypto coins to buy the ones that provide the most usefulness to people. So you need a limited supply, and anything needs to have value is scarcity and usefulness. If something's useful and scarce, it's going to have a price. And so look at these different cryptocurrencies, make sure you're buying ones that are scarce, and then buy the ones that are the most useful. And if Bitcoin's not the most useful one, and at $9 a transaction, I don't think it is, and with really incredibly weak privacy because of these 1 megabyte blocks and high fees, I don't think that's useful either. You don't want everybody to be able to spy on what you're doing financially. I think you should probably be buying coins other than Bitcoin, and I think we'll see those take off. And as the owner of Bitcoin.com and the person who basically helped kick off the entire Bitcoin ecosystem, arguably more than anybody else in the world, it breaks my heart to say that, but that's the truth. The truth is more important than what my feelings are.
Wow. Well, Roger Ver, I thank you for doing this interview, and I truly admire your genuine take on this whole situation. Like I say, you're an important figure, and I think that can sometimes in these sorts of debates, and certainly with the scaling debate sort of civil war, I know that might be lost, but there's a lot of us out here who have looked to your thoughts and your wisdom and will continue to do so. So Roger Ver, thank you very much for being on the show, and hopefully we can have you back on again when the boat has sort of righted itself, and we can have a positive talk about how things turned out great.
I would love to do that.
All right, thanks so much, Roger.
Thanks.
So pretty shocking.
Yeah, what a great interview.
Pretty shocking revelation. I did not think.
Yeah.
I was actually shocked when the CEO of Bitcoin.com, who's been the world's biggest Bitcoin booster, says it's actually more likely that it's not going to be Bitcoin, and tells people that if Bitcoin stays like it is, don't buy Bitcoin. Like
crazy.
He may be one of the top holders of the asset.
Right.
Like, to me, that's a very genuine position to hold. Like, when you see somebody whose own self-interest would be most served by saying, buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, and he's like, I don't know if I can really say buy Bitcoin. So I thank him for
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
candidness. That's crazy,
And
bro.
it's an open fucking market for the altcoins right now. It's
Well, dude, I had this discussion with one of the editors at Activist Post yesterday, or day before yesterday, where I was saying that I it's constant now that there's people every time I say something about Bitcoin, there's the Bitcoin bros, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who here's the interesting part about it. What do we know about Roger's background? Now, Roger's not a developer, but he said that this whole thing, his whole life was changed by an obsession with economics and an understanding of economics, right? And so for me, I'm both a software developer and as a developer, I've done a lot of e-commerce stuff. I've done a lot of things in terms of tracking demographics. I mean, I've got a patent that's ad insertion and tracking. So it's like understanding human action. And then in later years, really getting into economics, and particularly now Austrian economics, getting into all of that is like, what I see is that there are a whole bunch of people involved in this debate who either, you got to know one of two things, right? And preferably you'd want to know both when it comes to cryptocurrency if you're really going to invest in it. You don't have to, though, because there's no barrier to entry, right? Just like you could go and fucking blow your money as a day trader on Forex or buy penny stocks or whatever. People do it all the time. But economics and software, because that's what it is. That's what cryptocurrency is, right? So for me, And I was, like I say, I was having this discussion where it occurred to me that when I talk about I have no faith in Bitcoin, what and I talked about it a little bit there, is that it's like and one of the reasons why I haven't been so hot, why I've put a lot of my development stuff on hold, is that I'm really actually scared to sit down and devote hundreds or thousands of hours to coding something where Bitcoin is the cryptocurrency that I'm using on like a point of sale system. Because I'm like, oh, well, if by the time I'm able to get this to market, which might be a year, which might be 2 years, Bitcoin is irrelevant, or the fees are super high that nobody would use it, I'm going to have to go back and recode with a whole different cryptocurrency. So it's like, people are like, you're hating on Bitcoin, you're doing this. I'm like, dude, I've got all this shit sitting lined up that works with Bitcoin that I've been developing since 2013. When I started developing the Bitcoin with the Bitcoin libraries that I have, I could send transactions for under a penny. I could get transactions confirmed with no miner fee, 0 miner fee.
Wow.
Like not even a Satoshi, 0. Sure, I'd have to wait. Sure, I'd have to wait a long ass fucking time. But as he says, it was first see, first save. So it was like, fine, it's sitting there. If I've got an internal system, I'll wait on the confirmation. No problem. I can use it for a lot of different things. Right? And this was before Ethereum. So it's, I was thinking a lot of the same, obviously not at the same high level as Vitalik, but it's like thinking like, oh, maybe I could use micropayments to trigger shit and do this. And, and I was working on Arduino stuff at the same time and all of that. But it's like, this is what I'm talking about when I'm like, I have no confidence. It's not a matter of I'm going to go and I'm going to buy something and I'm going to hope that a week from now or a month from now or a year from now that it's going to go up in price. Fuck that.
Yeah, it's stupid.
Fuck that. I don't care because I'm an entrepreneur. I'm trying to build a business with this thing. I don't want to go and spend 1,000 hours of coding and then have to throw it away. That's what I have no confidence in. And that's what Roger's talking about. And that's what a huge amount of people who want to get involved in the scaling debate because it's fucking cool, because they're Bitcoin bros, because they're like, yeah, man, to the moon, to the moon, to the moon. And it's like, there's a reason why indigenous tribes, a lot of traditions, traditional cultures, even not indigenous, but often religious communities, they have an ideal where it's like, any major decision that you're going to make, especially financial decisions, think 3 generations into the future.
That's cool.
Right? Think not just how it will affect your children or your children's children, But think how it will affect the children that there's no way that you could even help if you wanted to, because you'll be dead. It's about time scales. And the interesting thing about it, if you think about that idea, something becomes self-evident. If you want to have good long-term results, and you don't think in the long term, you only think here, your chances of actually having good long-term results are infinitesimally less than if every financial decision you make is with a long time horizon.
Right.
And that's the problem with the idea of corporations. What's the big problem that everybody has with corporate America? Corporate CEOs make bad decisions. There's all this exploitation. They're polluting the water. They're doing this. Why? Because they only think a quarter ahead. Their time scale is 1 quarter, 3 months. Because if they don't nail their number, the number that's predicted for them, for their stocks and their earnings in that next quarter, that CEO could be fired. So why think 5 years in advance? And that's how you get the fuck up that it is. That's the corruption. And that's what our society is, and we're seeing it play out in a realm where there's no barrier to entry. But here's somebody who's been at it for a long time, who was thinking long term. Because why? Because his end goal was not to make money.
Yeah, it was to
make the world more free. And
power.
And, with some very good reasons to want to to fight back a little bit against a government who had wrongly imprisoned him. When you look at someone's motivation like that, it's worth taking a listen. So I really thank Roger for that. Thank Adam too. What do we got? Are we done?
Close to it.
Close to it? Well, it's starting to get hot for some reason in here. I don't know if you're feeling it.
Yeah, I'm feeling it.
I'm feeling it. So I'll say goodbye to the people. And wipe my forehead. Well, thank you for joining us today. I want to thank Roger Vera for coming on. What a great interview. And of course, thanks to Adam Kokesh. You guys go and check him out at thefreedomline.com. He's going to be heading back East Coast, and then it sounds like down around the South. So if you're in any of those areas, I suggest that you go out, meet and greet. He's a great guy. Go meet him in person. And not only that, not only are you going to get to meet Adam, but what's cool is that you'll get to meet like-minded people who are in your area. So it's an opportunity for you to go and actually meet some people who are next to you. And believe me, that makes a huge, huge difference. So just another reminder, I'll be up in New Hampshire at the Free Coast Festival, festival.freecoast.org. That's going to be the 8th through the 10th. If you are in the New Hampshire area, come on up and you can meet me and even more like-minded people and people associated with the Free State Project up there. Looking forward to that. And we will be back again next week. So if you want to check us out on podcast, those archives are available, iTunes and Stitcher. And of course, you can go to vinarmani.com to see all of our archives, both full shows and the show segments. We'll have both of these interviews up as their own separate and shareable pieces. So until next week, stay free.